Hey, it's Jake with Churchfront. We're here at a job site for a recent project we've been working on, and I thought it would be helpful to walk you through the AVL integration process. Maybe your church is considering a renovation or a new build, and that's going to entail AVL upgrades for audio, video, lighting, your broadcast system. I want to help you just take into account all the things you need to consider for a project like this. So let's head on in and I'll walk you through these things. The church you're seeing right now was a renovation, so they weren't building a new building. This building has been here for probably 40, 50 years, and they wanted to update everything. It hadn't been touched in a long time. Even though it's a renovation, it almost feels like a new build due to the extent of how much they tore out of all the old building materials and then all the new things that we are putting in this space. So in this project in particular, what you're seeing right now is it's probably going to be complete within a week or so. I'm sure there'll be some more final touches after that, but they'll be putting in the carpet and chairs and things like that. And we just completed installing the PA system, camera system, mixing system, microphones, and acoustic treatment. Make sure you take into consideration an adequate timeline for your AVL project for your church. There can be smaller projects that might just take a couple of weeks to design and deploy, and then there's large scale renovations or new constructions that you're really going to want to have sufficient lead time. We're talking in months to just make sure you're dedicating adequate time towards the design process, the procurement process of getting all the gear, equipment, and materials that you need for the job, and then finally the installation process. Here at Churchfront, we like to have at least 4 to 8 weeks for that design and drawing process, and that includes the time it takes for us to get out on site at the church for a full day to take measurements and really assess the space and really get to know you as a church and your goals and your needs, and we can start defining those objectives for the project. And once those objectives are defined, our design team and project managers can get together to produce those accurate drawings so that we can prepare a very accurate proposal for yourself and your leadership team before they sign off on moving forward with the project. And then once that design phase is done, it's going to take generally another, I'd say, 45 to 60 days, sometimes longer, to procure all of the equipment once we're ready to start placing purchase orders. Again, there's a lot of large equipment that goes into these installs. A lot of the PA systems that we install are actually custom made to order for each job. And the same thing goes for the LED video systems. These things aren't just stocked up in inventory in a warehouse sometimes. The actual manufacturer needs to wait for a specific order to come in order to produce that equipment. And that's especially true when you're in that mid to more premium level of equipment, where again, they're just not keeping a ton of inventory of this on hand. And just the way that a lot of this stuff is produced, it's best for it to be produced at the same time when it's for a specific project. And then there's the installation phase of the process, which takes a couple weeks. So I think that's actually one of the more straightforward timelines of the project. Is most 200 to 500 seat auditoriums that we've been working on, sometimes deploying an entire system can take anywhere from 5 days up to maybe 10 days on the larger end of those projects. When it comes to the timeline for any major AVL renovation or a new construction, make sure you are accounting for these timelines and you're budgeting adequate time in your overall project to make sure that you can design it right, you can procure all your equipment and materials on time, and then there's enough installation time for the install team. Cross-trade coordination and communication is really important in this process. You might have a general contractor and then you have subcontractors. It's going to look different for every project, every renovation or new build. Make sure that you have clear communication channels between your different trades. One thing I think is missed in a lot of church renovations and new builds is consulting with an interior designer. What I appreciate about this space is they did consult with an interior designer, and some of the choices they made with paint color and how that relates to things like the acoustic treatment that we put on the walls. These are really important conversations to have. I see them miss those conversations about interior design. So then they get the space constructed. You know, a GC does a good job at like making a sound structure or renovating things, and then they get to the painting process and they're like, what color should we paint things? And it's like, I don't know, I'm not an expert when it comes to interior design and architecture, but find the right person to consult you through that, and ideally find interior designers with experience in a church space who understand the relationship between design and worship and large gathering areas like this. I think it's something you want to be intentional about. Local codes are also important to take into consideration. Obviously, for some projects, you might have to be pulling permits. And if you're gonna have like fire marshals come through, make sure you're aware of your existing things like your sprinkler systems in your church, and can you even hang things from a ceiling? Is it gonna interfere with those types of systems? Just be aware of those local codes, and that's gonna be something that your general contractor is gonna be able to consult you on, of what you can and cannot do when deploying a new system. The design process is really important because you can see in this example equipment rack that we're building right now, there's a lot of gear going on right here, a lot of different devices in here, and then we have a lot of cable going on, right? So if you come back around here, you'll see the cable runs that we pulled through, and this kind of gives you a behind the scenes look of what's going on. We've got all sorts of speaker cable, video cable, and then network cable. And we need to make sure, and you need to make sure in any new installation, that all this is documented. And this is why this design process is not just, hey, put together a shopping list of some speakers and amps and a mixing console and mics, and there you go, it's all ready to go. It's like, no, you want to have thorough drawings of everything in the entire system. You want to know where each end of the cable is going to. Everything's labeled clearly, so that you're just taking all the costs into consideration, and then you have great documentation for future servicing for anybody else who needs to alter the system or troubleshoot things, that they have proper documentation they can refer to, so it's not a mystery when they come behind the equipment rack to start fixing things. And since we're back here by the equipment rack and you're seeing all the cables that are happening back here, this is another thing I want you to take into consideration for your project, is make sure you have adequate space for equipment racks. In most installs, we prefer having 2 equipment racks that are each 44 spaces, so they're probably just over 6 feet tall. This is actually a smaller one, and this is a more compact system that we're installing here because they're a little bit more limited on space. This client wanted everything to fit in this little closet right here, and we're able to make it work. Ideally though, we want to have a 44U equipment rack dedicated for your audio gear, and then another 44U equipment rack for your video gear and your computers and your network equipment and your KVM devices for your workstations. That allows plenty of room for the initial install, and then it also allows room for growth, especially if your church is in that few hundred to 500 seat auditorium capacity right now. It allows you to have room to add more equipment to that without having to add a new rack. So always be keeping in mind some future growth, especially that growth that's probably going to happen over the next decade or so. Keep in mind that future growth as you're designing your system. And again, back to that cross-trade coordination, is make sure for all the cable that you have running here, your electrical contractor does install adequate conduit to run all of the low voltage cable that your project is going to entail. And it's probably going to be more conduit than you think. Fortunately, these days a lot of things are digital, so you're not running humongous analog snakes from your stage to front of house anymore. And we actually like being able to consolidate most everything behind the stage in a rack room like this. But don't be surprised if for your AVL needs, you're gonna need a few conduit runs, and we're talking ideally at least 2-inch wide conduit, but it's always gonna vary depending on the design and how much cable you're actually running, because you can't pack a piece of conduit completely full with cable. There's gotta be an adequate amount of breathing room space in there per code and regulations and just safety. It's important to consider the workstation layout for your AVL design. A lot of churches that we've been deploying systems for are generally having 3 workstations or more. So you've got an audio workstation here for mixing audio for both in-person and online. A lot of systems we're deploying give our clients that ability. Then you have a computer graphics workstation, which can also easily run your lighting system for the stage and the house lights. And then you have a live stream or broadcast video workstation to take care of operating cameras and making sure the live stream goes out. So 3 stations can actually accomplish quite a bit. And then beyond that, you could start breaking out some of these roles, like maybe you want a separate workstation for a lighting designer, or you want to have 2 workstations for video, 1 person to operate cameras, 1 person to actually cut the video. And then for audio, same thing. You could have 1 person running sound in the room, and then maybe you have a separate broadcast suite for someone to run sound for online. So we'll usually typically see a setup like this in smaller churches where you can put 3 workstations in a tech booth to make everything happen here. There's no dedicated broadcast room or media room. Or in another church that we just did an install, they did have a front of house booth, and then not too far away, they also had a closed off broadcast control room for their video director and a separate audio workstation for mixing online. So just keep in mind in the design process, how do you want to lay out the workstation? What makes sense for your volunteer team, both now and as you grow? Just keep those things in consideration. So those are some of the really important things to consider as your church approaches a new audio-visual lighting upgrade, whether it's a renovation, whether it's a new build. Hopefully these tips were helpful to you and will save you some time and headache, whether you're working with our team to kind of understand that process better, or if you're working with another AVL integrator and installer in your area. I'd encourage you to check out the rest of our YouTube channel here at Churchfront to see case studies of projects that we've implemented. That's going to give you a lot of design ideas. And of course, if you would like to work with us, we're easy to get a hold of. Just head on over to churchfront.com. Thanks so much for watching the video. Leave a like, leave a question or comment down below, and we'll see you next time.